afternoon. Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Bridget Elder, and I'm one of the full-time faculty members in the psychology department. So on behalf of the psychology department, I want to welcome you to our Careers in Psychology workshop. Thank you so much for coming. This really is for you, students. How many of you are psych majors, so our guest panel can see that? Okay, so a lot of psych majors here, a lot of people maybe just curious about the major. I remember when I was a psych major, I really didn't get the opportunity to talk to people who are actually working in the field and hearing about all the different types of career paths that are possible for working in psychology. And so this is our second Careers in Psychology workshop, and we're, again, so glad that you're here. Really, this is about you, and this is going to be run by you. So we're going to start off just with some introductions from our illustrious panel. And then what we'd like to do is turn it over to you and hear your questions about working in the field of psychology. Okay, so let me introduce our panel first. So we have Dr. Jill Young, and she is the site director for Therapeutic Pathways, which is an early intervention program for children with autism. And we have Erik Cooper, who is Dean of Planning, Research, and Resource Development here at Sierra College. And Gia Herndon is on her way. She had a flat tire, so sympathy there. But she's on her way. She's coming. She is a marriage family therapist, abbreviated MFT. And then we have Sandy Muraki, who is one of our counselors here at Sierra for psychology students. Okay, so what I'm going to have you all do, maybe we'll start with Erik, if you can give us just a couple minutes about your career path, so your education and how you got to the position that you're in currently.
All right, so as she said, I am Erik Cooper. I'm Dean of Planning, Research, and Resource Development here at Sierra College. And of the careers, I'm probably the least psychology-ish of the people you're going to hear about today. But my bachelor's is in psychology. I got it from Sac State and really enjoyed my time there. And went to the University of Oregon and got my MS in neuroscience, studying up there under a guy named Cliff Campos, who's really interested in memory, particularly in rats and mice, which is part of the reason that I'm only an MS. So I really didn't enjoy doing brain surgery on rats and mice. Rat and mice are really mean. So recognizing those limitations, I started looking around at different careers, and I worked as a tutor through my undergraduate career and through my master's, and got a job at Western Washington University running a tutoring center there, which was fantastic. The only problem is their budget had stayed stagnant for a really long time. And so I ended up doing this research basically to show that tutoring was effective for college students. So basically using the research skills that I gained through my education in psychology to basically prove or show, you never prove anything, to show that there was a relationship between tutoring and college success across a variety of different factors, regardless of students' income or their high school GPA and what have you. And that got me into institutional research at the college level, trying to look at, how successful are we as educators at getting students to graduate? What are the factors that don't go in, or what are the factors that affect students graduating or not graduating? So you guys have, I'm sure, heard of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs and looking at those factors. Well, why do we have things like financial aid? Because it's trying to take care of some of those lower level factors in Maslow's hierarchy, food and shelter and need, etc. So trying to take application psychology, application statistics, and trying to make the education world a little better place.
Thanks, Erik. Jill, you want to go next?
Sure, but I am going to forewarn you that I have a fake tattoo. So I was wearing this sweater, but I'm boiling to death, so I'm taking it off. But I'm afraid of needles, so my tattoo is fake. I actually got my bachelor's degree at Sac State too, and I would like to say that I just love psychology and I wanted to know more about people, so I started my career as a psychologist and just went from there. But that would be really untrue because I think I majored in everything that they had at Sac State at the time, and every time I got to the requirement of public speaking, I dropped that major and took another major. And psychology was the only major that did not require public speaking. So that was the one I took. And I also found out that as I jumped around to different majors, is that one of the things that really intrigued me was why people do sometimes the crazy things and sometimes the really smart things that they do. And I got very interested in behavior, and I got very interested in science. And so when I went into the department there, they had a very strong group of faculty who was in behavior analysis. And I thought that was the neatest thing because it blended what I loved about science with my interest in figuring out people, figuring out relationships, figuring out what makes people tick and why some kids go to school and shoot all their classmates, and some kids go to school and become valedictorian. I thought these were really exciting things to think about. So because I was so excited about how people behave, I went into my first Ph.D. program in Washington State, and it was a research-oriented program, and I worked with rats and pigeons, which was fun, but like you said, they're actually very kind of nasty. I got bit by a pregnant rat, and that wasn't very fun, and I mostly hung out in the neuropsych lab because they were doing the really cool stuff. And after about a year, I learned a tremendous amount that I realized I didn't want to stay in academia, and I didn't want to ask really good questions or get really good answers about what I felt was kind of insignificant questions. How do we get the rat to press the bar faster, longer, with its hind feet, with its nose, with its whiskers, things like that. And I'm being a little facetious. They did really good research, but it just wasn't exciting to me. I wanted to know about human behavior. So I left that PhD program and went down to UOP and worked on my master's there and worked with individuals with schizophrenia. And I just thought that was the best. I loved them, loved working with them, loved everything about that, and then went into a PhD program in New York, with the big fantasy I was going to live in Soho in a studio, and I ended up in Flushing in a basement of someone's house. So, you know, mostly my career is built on fantasy that the reality was a little bit different than what I thought it was going to be. Kind of by a couple different processes, ended up working with children with autism. And children with autism fascinated me because most of the time, if you are in the area of psychology, you're going to deal with, you know, kind of presenting problems. You're going to have, yeah, I'm not happy in my life, or I'm not happy in my marriage, or my children are running amok, but you're dealing with something kind of finite that you want to help someone fix. With children with autism, I found that you were basically handed kind of a blank slate and said, please make this into a human being with all the variety and nuances and wonderful kinds of behaviors that come with being a human being. So once we learned how to work with kids about teaching them to catch up to kindergarten standards, which is pretty easy to do now, how numbers, letters, colors, shapes, easy stuff. Now I'm finally in my career where we're asking them, finally, after all these years, the questions that are the most intriguing to me. What does it mean to be a friend? What does it mean to know who's a good friend and who's not a good friend? What are the qualities of life that we all strive for? Is it really just a job? Is it really just to be able to make your bed? What are the things that make us human beings? How do we critically think? How do I know that just because my favorite color green isn't maybe your favorite color green? As crazy as that would be, you may have a different history. Those are really neat questions, and children with autism really force us to answer them, ask them. I've worked with lots of families who, when I say, they say, all I want is for my child to have friends. And I say, okay, how many friends? Well, you know, a lot of friends. Really, what kind of friends do you have? What do you do with your friends? Very different answers, because there is no right answer. I don't know how many friends a 8-year-old should have. Sometimes you think they have too many. Sometimes they have too many of the wrong kind. Sometimes they have one best friend. What is correct? What is what we are striving for? So those are the neat answers or questions I get to deal with on a daily basis. And it's still all about behavior, interactions, how people behave in a system called a family, or a system called an agency, or a system called a country, or a system called a world, and what kinds of things influence how we behave in those systems, and how we can change and how we can predict that behavior. So that's how I ended up where I am, still asking mostly questions and getting some good answers.
I apologize. Did you get my message? Oh, you did. I was white knuckling it all the way through. Okay, I'm not quite sure what the prompt is.
You're supposed to say how you became the person you are today.
Wow.
You were born.
I was born 1964. Okay. I am a marriage and family therapist. My name is Herndon, and I do apologize for being late. I'm glad I got here. How did I get here? Well, I was a kid and a student who struggled. I had a really hard time in high school, barely graduated from high school, and was pretty lost, had a pretty dysfunctional family and a dysfunctional home. And it took me about 10 years. I was a returning student, and I think because of my own life path, my own journey, and the doors that were closed versus the doors that were opened, and then how I developed a sense of self and a sense of place and purpose in the world as a result, influenced my decision to become a therapist. And that's the short and skinny of it. It may have been a little bit short. Pardon me? What did you get degrees? I got my degrees at CSU Bakersfield. Again, I was a returning student, and my husband and I at the time both returned to school. It was something that we wanted to do when we were younger, but something that wasn't very available or accessible to us, not until we got a little bit older. And we both went back to school together, and our children, we did homework with our children. And it was great. I still have great memories of my youngest daughter. I'd say, Jordan, what's this? She said, that's the brain. It's the brain. She didn't write the little brain next to her. So I went to CSU Bakersfield because it was in my hometown. It was affordable. I could be a mommy. I could work and do what I needed to do while I went back to school. And I didn't figure out what I wanted to do until I was close to 30. And then it was like, okay, I know exactly what I want to do. So going to school prior to that was very difficult for me because I didn't have a goal. I didn't know which direction I wanted to go. So that was that's where I went to school. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology. I have currently have a private practice. I ran here, so can you guys tell I'm still getting my breath? I have a private practice and I teach part-time. I see that somebody here is a counseling master's in counseling teacher, and I did that for a while at CSU Bakersfield, as well as I worked in their counseling center. And so right now I split my time between teaching and my private practice. Any other prompts I need?
Hi, I'm Sandy Muraki. I'm one of the counselors here at Sierra College. How many people have a college counselor? And you've seen a counselor? Okay, so that's what I do. I'm a college counselor here at Sierra College, and if you haven't come in counseling, I definitely want to see you. So I definitely brought some handouts for afterwards, and I have my business card. But, so again, my name's Sandy Muraki, and I'm over in the counseling center, and I help you with your academic planning, your personal things that go on in your busy life that affect your success as a student. Also with career planning, and so this is perfect to find out what you're exploring, what's out there. So a lot of things happen, and I just want to ask you where you're at as far as how many people are psychology majors? From a scale from 1 to 10, ask yourself, 1 being not really sure, but 10, yes, I'm a psychology major. Answer that question. 1, I'm not so sure, I need to do more exploration, talk to more folks and network. Or 10, absolutely. And what do I need to do to get there? So there are different types of counselors. You probably met them or not, and there's some that may be gatekeepers and say, oh, sorry, you can't go there, that direction, but you know, I haven't thought about this, your grades aren't that great. There are those that are cheerleaders. Cheerleaders say, yes, you can do it. Cheerleaders like your parents, your friends say, yeah, you can do it. It's okay, Miho, you got an F in that class, we're still going to make it work. Okay, yeah. And then there are those counselors that are coaches. How do you get to your goal? who are going to be supportive. It's okay to do so well in that exam, but let's see what you can do to make sure that you are successful next time. What's the long-term goal? What are your goals here? What are your long-term goals there? So psychology is a really hard field sometimes because as I went to school, I wasn't sure what I wanted to major in and what I wanted to do. That was my path. My parents did not go to college. They barely graduated high school. They were immigrants. They spoke English was their second language. So how many people are undecided on their major? And that's probably like the #1 major at Sierra College. And then sometimes people do transition. So it sounds like you're in the right place as far as figuring it out. And these are the things you need to do. And so my recommendation is definitely come in and see me or one of us. We're all different. Just like doctors, you search around and you find somebody you connect with instantly, that you trust, that you know they're going to be supportive. There are so many of you, okay? And so I wish I could just talk to you individually, and that's what I want, is to talk to you individually and to know your name. So if you can, just take a moment and all at once, yell out your name to me.
Drake's hired.
What's you? Nice to meet you. Okay. Thank you so much. So what I like to hear from you is not just me going, this is what you need, blah, 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 blah. I want to hear your goals and your dreams, your concerns, your challenges, and how are you going to get to your goal? Because it's hard to navigate. So just in a short moment, again, as I mentioned, when I went to college, I didn't know. My parents didn't know what to do, but they just knew college is the way. And as far as career, what can you do with that? If I get a bachelor's degree, what can I do with that? Oh, I should go to graduate school. I need to go on further. But how do I do that? So that is the role that I love. Because psychology is what intrigued me about when I went to college. I didn't know. I went to a community college also, like yourselves. I think it's the best deal in the world because it is so intimate and empowered with professors. And that's what changed my life. A general psychology class. I met my best friend in that class. It was smaller. My niece, we went to a pre-med conference at UC Davis this weekend. And she's at Cal, UC Berkeley. Her second year, she was thinking about pre-med and she wants to do it. She was telling me about her chemistry class. And I said, how many people do you have in your chemistry class? 1,000 students in her chemistry class. You are so fortunate. These people are, your professors care about you wanting to do this, that they have office hours, they want that relationship, they get to see you every other day or every week. You take advantage of that. So it's really a wonderful city. And so I went to a community college, Santa Monica College, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just took general classes hoping that will come to me, but it really came from the class that I loved. And I wanted to know about people. I really want to know about myself and my family. And why are they so crazy? Why am I so crazy? But that I also wanted to connect with people. That I wanted that relationship. And I wanted to do something that was going to be meaningful to me. But I also needed a living. I needed to sustain myself. I needed income. I need a job. I needed a career. I need money. So I needed to find out what is out there. Do I really want to go into a field that maybe I'm not going to make as much? Or do I want to make my money and I want to also love what I do and make a difference? So I love psychology. Found out what my options were. Did the right things. Didn't have a great counselor the first time, but then I found someone I really connected with. Cool, and also instructors that I really connected with, professors, and then transferred over to UCLA. So you have those options as well to transfer on. Transferred to UCLA, and I found psychology, so I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. Connected well there, and at UCLA I connected with doing different types of internship, working in a mental hospital with schizophrenic males, also working with ADHD, hyperactive children at the elementary school over at UCLA. Also connected with the different professors, even though there's like 500 in the classroom, they still had office hours and they still had time. And the graduate students who are teaching assistants, got to meet them, confronted them, find out what they're doing. They're getting their doctorate in psychology and developmental or sports psychology or, different areas. And I talked to them, found out what I needed asked to do. And so I went on to CSU Northridge to get my master's degree in clinical community psychology. There, took advantage of internships, getting experience, getting exposed to different fields. I worked at the university counseling department, and that was more mental health counseling, crisis counseling, things going on. And I found that was challenging, but I enjoyed it, and also got to teach some neuropsychology classes, which I really enjoyed. And then after that, it was like, well, I have this master's degree, but how do I get a job? How do I get a job? Oh my gosh. It's like I needed guidance as well, so doing different things. So I actually work at Nutrisystem. Have you heard of Nutrisystem? Yeah, because I was like, I don't know what to do. I thought, I'm going to get a degree, I'm going to get a job right off the bat at a full-time job teaching psychology at a community college. No, you need experience. You need to have more training. You need to have your foot in the door. You need to work your way up. So I did counseling there, and then worked into management and sales and assistant manager. But that's not really what I wanted to do. I really wanted to go where I started out, when my roots were in counseling. That made a difference to me. So did internships each of the community colleges, worked my way up, and I worked at Sacramento City College international students and helping them with their education. Then I worked at Casunas River College, another community college, and worked with a program called EOPNS, for Extended Option Program and Services, and care students, so single parents, to help them with their education and support services. Did part-time with counseling at Casunas River College, Napa Valley College, Yuba College, and then also, as I did those different things, I had mentors. I had people who helped me along the way. I had those coaches. I had people who cared enough that I connected with, that I reached out and said, can you help me? How did you do this? How did you get to where you're at? And develop those relationships. And so that those people helped me where I was able then to apply for a full-time job, and that was like 18 years ago. I applied for a job at Sear College. I applied for other jobs that I didn't get, but I did get a full-time job and a tenure track job as a counseling faculty member here, and I love it. I love meeting and working with you and with the faculty members too. So it's different paths for everyone, but really, I really want to hear your story and where you're at. And so at any time you can go ahead and make a counseling appointment. And again, I have handouts and I have my business card. And it may not be me, but reach out to somebody. Again, you have wonderful mentors and coaches and professors here, and here's a whole panel as well. So thank you.
We'd like to take questions. So if you have a question, please don't hesitate. Raise your hand. Yes.
What's the difference between MS and MA?
The MS is a Master's in Science, and the MA is a Master of Arts.
They both can require a thesis.
They can't both require a thesis.
At my college, actually, the biggest difference between the two is the MS, I had to take an extra term of stats, and I also did not have to take a foreign language. Whereas the MA, they had less stats, but they had to demonstrate proficiency in a foreign language. That was my school.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was the differential in my school, but one was a little bit more. In my school, one was a little more clinically oriented, and the other was an education track. So it's not a huge difference. The stats, though, is a big difference if you're afraid of stats. Which, don't be afraid of stats. Just keep trying. You'll get it. I know there's questions, but I wanted to piggyback on what she said about, seeing your counselor because they know some things about when classes are coming up. It's very important to stay in touch with your counselor. They know where resources are, and having a mentor. And rarely is anybody's road a straight road, and a lot of times things will throw you off track, and your school counselors are so effective and so helpful. And if you don't like the one that you've been assigned to, you can ask for another one, right? Yeah, absolutely. Sorry if you interrupt, but they're very valuable.
All right, other questions? Yes.
I'm trying to get into cognitive neuroscience, and I was wondering what kind of jobs there were.
For next.
There's a lot of job in, as you said, research and education, assessment, which kind of piggybacks into what I do on a day-to-day basis as well. Certainly helping out in hospitals, pathology type type stuff where you end up helping in those areas as well. You can end up consulting with clinicians and neurologists. You can be a consultant there as well.
Is it a really competitive field?
Without being too judgmental, cognitive neuroscience, at least at the moment, is really kind of some of the, really where a lot of the cutting edge research in psychology is. So actually it's really competitive to get into programs right now. And then from there, it can be competitive to get a job. It depends on what you want to do in that job and what research you're interested in, what colleges you go to, what connections you make, whether you want to go be a postdoc. So after you get your Ph.D., still go essentially be a student if you get paid a small amount. So you learn even more. So it kind of depends on what you want to do with that cognitive neuroscience degree. So there's not a really easy answer to that question. But yeah, there are definitely jobs out there in that area.
And part of that, I think, determines whether you want to work with people or you prefer working in a laboratory, you know, or doing research, or, you know, there's different things that you can do, and having, you know, whatever your propensity is. Guide that.
Are there higher level behavioral science degrees, and does psychology and behavioral science work together a lot in professional fields? So I'm going after a behavioral science degree. I was a psych major and I switched, and so I'm curious if those are two things that are going hand in hand, or if that's just a community college degree that is more general. Do you guys run into a lot of, do you have coworkers that are behavioral science majors?
Do you have colleagues that are behavioral science majors?
Yeah.
I think that maybe, correct me, maybe more of a community college level, and then when you get into a bachelor's degree or above, then you're gonna focus maybe in social work or sociology or psychology, or is that pretty accurate? Okay.
Yeah, I piggyback that as well. Behavioral science covers a lot of different social science
It does.
fields. Weirdly enough, the higher your big quotes, higher your degree is, generally the more specific you get about a subject. So cognitive neuroscience, behavioral neuroscience, biological neuroscience, and there's different aspects of that, and they're all very specific. Behavioral science is going to be a little bit more broad and give you a more general background into sociology and psychology and social work and maybe political science and economics and a whole bunch of things that fall into that category.
Because it's really a behavioral science. We are a behavioral science. Psychology is sort of a behavioral science and sociology. And so you would then, if you go onto a four-year university, again, like you said, get more specific and get more narrow.
So it gets a little bit confusing.
Yeah, it
because we
does.
do have that behavioral science degree. So we have an AS or AA in social behavioral science, and it's very broad when you look at it. And then we do have the psychology degree that's very specific. And then I brought information about transfer degrees for psychology called the AAT, Associate of Arts for Transfer. It's real specific, and so yeah, it's very broad. And then you can
Does that answer your question, or just make more questions?
Totally.
Okay.
Ultimately, I want to work with families and autistic children. Is speech pathology the right major to be in?
It can be. We have actually in our agency, we have one of our agency directors is a speech and language pathologist, and she linked up with a behavior analyst because she was interested more broadly in language development and more intense language training. Sometimes as if you work in a school setting or a hospital setting as a speech therapist, you may only see that child an hour a week or a half hour a week, and her thought was that that's not going to get the kind of language that these specific kids may need because they're learning all of language. But that's actually, in our field, a really valuable degree to have, because there's a lot of behavior analysts who are interested in what they will call verbal behavior, who don't really know probably as much about language development as some of the folks coming in with speech therapy do. So it's actually fields that go hand in hand, and it's a core deficit for children with autism. So we really like it when we have speech therapists who are also interested more broadly in behavioral change.
But if I want to focus more on the family and the child, what path would I take? What I have to take?
Well, it depends on how you want to focus you're thinking, I really want to go in and when we work with a child, that child comes with a family, and you can't have intervention for the child in the absence of the family. So we work closely with families, but we're not really there to necessarily help them through some of the grieving process or other kinds of things they're doing, and they're going through because of suddenly having this child with a disability. We're really there advocating for the child. But we work within that system, and we provide some support and training for the family as well. So, if you're thinking, I really want to do more family-oriented work, you may be interested in doing more of the MFT, and you can blend those. You can have, I'm an MFT and I'm really interested in language and the way people talk to each other. And the way, there's a really good book by Bob Risley called Meaningful Differences, and it was written a while ago, but it was written with he and a speech and language therapist, and they looked at, in typically developing children, the difference in language development just with the different language environments in which the kids live in. So, to me, I've always felt I'm going to get a degree in what I'm interested in, and then I'm going to make that degree work for me. 20 people show up at the doorway, and they all have masters in psychology, and somebody shows up and says, hey, I have my degree in speech and language development, but I'm really interested broadly in these things. I'm going to talk to the person who has the speech and language. So don't let the degree pigeonhole you.
Yeah, I agree with what you say. Agree in what you like, and then the rest will unfold. But if you're more interested in families, you can become an MFT, you can be a social worker, and in a lot of agencies, and I didn't get to hear where yours was, but there are interdisciplinary teams, and you would be one aspect of that interdisciplinary team, and your specialty kind of unfolds as you go.
Thank you.
I have a pretty specific goal in mind. I've had a career field with working with at-risk youth and teenagers with mental health diagnoses, and I want to be an MFT. But you guys have said a lot about social networking and getting your foot in the door. Now, how did you guys go about doing that? Like, was it at school? Was it out in the community? Was it at training? What, like?
Do you want me to? Okay. As a student, I got involved. With our honors society. We did do volunteer stuff. We did some advocacy stuff. I went out and got involved with NAMI, the National Association of Mental Illness. I hope I said that right. My brain has not caught up to my body yet. Some local community groups. We put on, you do attend workshops once you become a licensed marriage and family therapist, and you do have to continue to get education. So that's where you specialize, and you attend a lot of workshops, but really getting involved. And the other thing, that's what I missed when you said internships. While you're in your community college, while you're in your undergraduate, if you go on to a four-year university, any opportunity you can to do an internship, do it. Because that is the best type of networking, I think. You get to try something out, you get to see people in practice, and you're making those kinds of connections. And if you make good connections with people, they will remember you, and they will become your mentors. And I think mentors are very important in the behavioral sciences, especially, and the types of work that we do. It's tough work sometimes. Yeah, and you need mentors, you need people to turn to. And so I hope that answers your question. But I do think that internships and getting involved in things, volunteering are very important.
Yeah, internships. So as far as the handout, we do have, did you know that how many people knew we had internships available in the current connections? Not enough. Yeah, so now you know, and so it's here, in Career Connections is right by counseling. And so we have internships when you're exploring. You can explore different fields, and also towards the end of your degree, internships. It's also talking about career information, what's out there. There's a lot of resources. For you, it's free. As a student at Sierra College, it's free where you have access to information, where you can look at vocational biographies, you can look up labor market information, how much do they make, what do they actually do, California labor market information, and also national. So as far as kind of general idea of ballpark figure, how much they make, how much schooling, how do I get there? So a lot of information as well. So yeah.
Where is that information?
I'm going to hand it out afterwards so that you can focus on the path.
Anyone else at social networking, mentoring, how you did it?
I think one of the important things is where you're at now. It's better to be in your approach to be very socialistic and become capitalistic later. You want to basically experience and see everything as an opportunity, even if it's volunteering, because you're going to be meeting people. Don't be shy to go online, just find who is doing the best work in what you're interested in, even if they're in a different state. Email them. Hey, I'm interested in this. Go out into the community. If you're interested in working with adolescents, where the heck are adolescents? Can you volunteer there? Don't worry so much right now on, I know Maslow, not personally, but, about, I know you want to get things, buy things, have a way that you're living, and goodness, don't take more student loans out than you need because they're really hard to pay off in psychology. However, be really generous with your time. Volunteer. See things as an opportunity. If you're already working somewhere and someone says, hey, I need somebody to do such and such, don't look at that as they're putting more work on your plate. Look at that as that's an opportunity. That's an opportunity for me to shine. And just that little difference, I see people rising to the top, and then I see people who are very diligent. They're not going to do anything more than what they get from it. So you've got your whole life ahead of you to turn things around and say, hey, I have value and you're going to pay me for everything that I'm going to do. But don't take that approach right now. Be open to everything.
And for myself, as far as finding a mentor or talking to people, it was very intimidating for me to think of talking to somebody like a professor. But I found that when I transferred to UCLA, in the first classes I took, I transferred, and I had to take some general ed. I thought, oh, I'm done with psychology, my pre-med, my pre-major stuff, or chemistry, physics, or whatever. But I still need a general ed class. I had to take an econ class. I did the econ class. It was great because I sat in the back. They didn't take roll. She didn't collect homework. The professor. So it was great. It was fun. I had a blast. Joined a sorority and had a lot of fun. And it's like cool. And then midterms. It's 10 weeks. It's quick. It's a quarter system. 5 weeks. Midterm. And then final test. You're done. My midterm. I got an F. Oh my God. I was like, okay, that's a wake-up call. I better get my butt in gear. And I went to that professor and I said, I don't understand anything that is going on. I was brutally honest. And she was actually really receptive and said, you know what? Okay, here's what you need to do. There's tutoring available. You get yourself a tutor. You do the homework. You have specific problems with questions, and you can sit in the front row. And that's what I did. I grabbed a tutor. It was a group tutoring. It was really helpful because there were other people like myself struggling in the same subject area. I sat in the front row, and I did go to her office hours, and I passed the final an A. My counselor, meanwhile, I was really embarrassed, but she gave me good advice. She said, this is not part of your major. You can do a pass and pass. So if you don't pass, it's okay. It's going to protect your GPA. And if you pass, awesome, it works. And that's what I did. I got A, an F, and an A. I set the C average, I passed. So from there I learned, you know what, my professors are human beings too, and you know what, they're open, they like talking about themselves, I want to hear about them, it's exciting, it's a field, it's a relationship. And so from there I developed relationships with the TAs, the graduate students, and I learned so much about what they do. And I didn't go into developmental psychology, but I really learned like, oh, you know what, there's a position on campus, there's a position called peer advising, and you could be a peer advisor on campus. And you look like you could really fit into that. And I applied for that job and I got it. You know, when it was like so many handful of students, and so I did, and I loved it. I loved being a peer advisor and helping other folks who were lost like me. And then there was other job opportunities, like, hey, did you know blah, 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 this is available? I worked at the Rural Woods camp in the summer, and so there, once I opened that door, like, okay, it's all right to open myself, and even in class, even in my class, I felt there were mentors and there were people. Because in class, I didn't want to say anything to anybody, and I just wanted just to go there, and when you're in a commuter school, sometimes it's hard to connect. It's hard, because you come and you go. You got a job, you got a family, you got a responsibility. It's hard to, it's so important to connect. And so I opened myself up again and said, hi, I'm Sandy. Are you in psychology? I love this teacher. She's so great. I was met my best friends. So it was really, so get involved, find your niche. You don't have to be a member. We care. But you have to take that first step. You got to take that risk. And so it's scary, and so you might get rejected as a kid, but you'll find someone else who cares. So really reaching out, taking that risk. Put down that cell phone. Don't be on that cell phone fussing around. Go ahead and just talk. Just talk. Say, hey, what's up?
Other questions? Yes. I'm interested in clinical psychology, but I wanted to know what the difference is between that and therapy.
And are you talking about like a Ph.D.? I mean, I do clinical work.
Yeah.
So I'm trained clinically. I can diagnose and treat a whole host of mental health disorders. So you can do clinical work with a master's degree, or you can go on and get a Ph.D. or a Ph.D. and do clinical work.
Yeah.
Do you know what population you might want to work with, or you're not quite sure yet?
Not sure yet. I just wanted to know if there was any differences between a therapist and a clinical psychologist, if that makes sense.
Well, a clinical psychologist does have a Ph.D. or a Ph.D.
Okay.
Okay, so they have a more extensive education. A lot of that education is in testing and assessment, and that's a big focus. So they have that in addition to what mine is, which is diagnosis and treatment, if that makes sense. So,
yeah.
And a lot of clinical psychologists will work at corporations, universities, prisons. It just depends.
Prison.
I know, I was trying to avoid prison. I was like, what can I throw on top of that? Prison would be the last thing. But, and you would make more money. You can charge more money. They also have private practice, and that component that they have is that they can do full-scale assessment with a battery of tests and work. They can diagnose for autism and make recommendations there, and that's a little bit outside of the scope of my practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does that answer
Yeah,
your
no,
question
that
a little bit
helps.
more?
Yeah.
Okay, so more school, more money, if that's something that you're interested in, and certainly more prestige. But I don't really want to do a lot of testing and write reports.
Yeah.
I want to work with people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But it is very interesting, and it just adds more pieces to the puzzle. So I didn't want that to sound disrespectful.
No.
That's are clinical psychologists.
But then there's, even if you want to go into clinical psychology, there is all sorts of different fields in clinical psychology. There's cognitive behavioral, there's all sorts of different things. And clinical programs can be very competitive to get into. But if you don't get into a clinical program, that doesn't mean you couldn't go on with your PhD and become a clinical psychologist.
Right.
So my degree is in research. It's a more of a research oriented, but I found a way to do my practicum for 1 year before I finished the PhD and 1 year after I finished the PhD. So I'd still qualify to sit for the licensing exam. So there's always all sorts of different ways to get what you want, even if you don't necessarily land where you want.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Could you talk a little bit more about the AAT program and what that entails and how long it might take at a junior college level to get to the next step?
So the AAT for transfer to associate's of arts degree, we have lots of degrees that we offer at Sierra College. And so you might hear it as like a 2-year degree, but it really is 60 units, and there's certain requirements. You have your general education, and you have your learning skills of reading, writing, speaking, listening, your general ed, and then you have the major. So it's something that you guys created, that AAT. It's real specific, and it's statewide. It's actually legislation where the legislators came up with the idea, let's help the community college along and encourage them to create these additional degrees in addition to what we have that will help students transfer classes, like they want to get a degree here at Sierra College and also transfer to university, that it's a smooth transition. You're not wasting time on taking classes that you don't need. It's like, so maybe in the past that was definitely possible. It might have been confusing. You might have ended up with an Associate's of Arts and Psychology degree and think, okay, you know what, now I'm going to transfer. And you know what, sorry, you need to stay here another year or two to do these other requirements for the university. So it's overlapping at the get-go, and it's something that you can also pick up along the way. So it's real specific to transfer. It's where you can follow the pattern for the CSU system, California State University system, their general ed. You might see it as the green sheet, and I brought that along. Or if you're thinking of UC, then you can follow that pattern, and then the specific pattern that we have here. There's also other requirements as well from the university, but it's to try to make it as a smooth transition. So I brought that information as well as what's had it in that degree.
It's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
It definitely is.
I did. How much is the education now between neuroscience and just psychology major overlapping, or?
So maybe I'll take that one. So neuroscience really is a blending of multiple different majors. It really started as an interdisciplinary study, really between biology, computer science, and psychology. So you heard cognitive neuroscience mentioned earlier. That really is the psychology side of it, right? You're looking at the brain and systems of the brain interacting to create, behavior. The biology side really came from the cellular neuroscience side, where they were looking at, okay, this individual neuron, and it fires and it does something to this other neuron, and eventually the two sort of merged together. And then along came computer science, where they're trying to model really complex systems and trying to predict behavior using neurological models, essentially. And so the three kind of interwove to become what we're calling now neuroscience, and it's just the blending of all of them. But certainly, in your AA here, you have a biopsychology course. It's actually called biopsychology, right?
Yes.
Because there are some different terms for that elsewhere. But essentially, that's your introductory neuroscience course from the psychology side. So absolutely, they blend together, and it's becoming more and more part of psychology.
So necessarily majoring in neuroscience versus psychology is not.
Well, so my degree in neuroscience, but technically I did mine through the psychology department at the University of Oregon. So for that program, it's truly an interdisciplinary program, and you can get it from, I think, 4 different departments.
Okay.
I just happened to go through the psychology side because that's where my undergraduate degree was from.
Okay.
But you could have done it from biology or computer science or human physiology. I think those are the 4 departments at the University of Oregon that all combine to form the neuroscience department.
I'm just curious about, as far as going to medical school and getting your degree to be a psychiatrist, but not necessarily wanting to do that much school, or science-oriented school. Well, I mean, I want to work in a hospital setting, like mental hospital setting, but I would prefer to stay on the psychology track. So would neuroscience be a major you would be leaning?
No, really, the MFT, clinical
But does that put
psychology.
you in just I'm not necessarily interested in, I don't know, would you say your job's emotionally taxing?
It's not for me. It probably is for most people.
That's what
I think my specialty is trauma, and I just kind of dig in here, and that's what I do.
yeah.
But it's it is for most people, and most people look at it and go, how on earth do you do that?
Right.
But I mean, are you wanting to do it from a more medical model and prescribe medication and take care? Okay, no, so you're not interested in
But
that.
I just don't know how easily, I want to do more what marriage and family therapy, family, right, what
It's
people
all about
hands
having
on.
good boundaries.
Except for how much can you clock in and clock out without having it.
It's something you learn to do. Now, I'll be honest with you though, at some level, I'm in private practice as well, I am on call 24/7. So if I have a client who's having a crisis, I have liability and obligations to them. In my private practice setting, I don't typically have people that are at a level of functioning and crisis that they would need to call me 24/7, but I am available and my clients know that. for the most part, it's within the hours that I see them in my office. Does that make sense? So it really depends on the setting in which you work. And certainly if you work for an agency, you're going to have your 40 hours a week. And there's going to be other people that take over when you're not there. If that makes any sense.
So you learn, you develop. You
Oh,
learn
yeah.
into it.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to have a
You do
medical
or you burn out and
degree.
you don't do it anymore.
Right.
Yeah, so you absolutely learn how to you debrief and you have boundaries and you take care of yourself and you debrief and you have lots of support with other clinicians and mentors and people, and surround yourself with people that love you and you'll be okay.
Yeah, I was just separated from doing more like something that where you just put your time in and then take out, but I'm so interested in helping people. And so it's like separates you kind of in the psychology world.
There's a good program for at UOP called Community Reentry Project, and they work with people, mostly schizophrenics. But if that's something you think that you might be interested in, the person who runs it down there, his name is Chris Clay, and contact him and say, I'd like to come down. I'm thinking about this as a field. I'm interested in mental health, and go and see some of the things that they're doing there.
What was it called?
It's called CRP, Community Reentry Project. It's with the psychology department, and they have a couple different programs they have for people with schizophrenia. And that's actually, unfortunately, the field of behavior analysis is sort of hijacked by autism, but it's really not about autism. And areas in behavior analysis that are probably going to be the next kind of area of interest are head trauma, mental illness, some of those other areas. The other good thing about behavior analysis, I'll put a plug in for that, is one of the things I was very interested in as I went through my career is I really wanted to get as many certificates and licenses as humanly possible, because then I felt like I don't think I'll ever be homeless because I have this, which was a huge fear motivating. If you go into behavior analysis, you can become a board certified associate behavior analyst with a bachelor's degree. You can become a board certified behavior analyst with a master's degree. Or you can go on for a Ph.D. and your CBA-P. And in California, there is currently legislation that is beginning to get moved so that behavior analysts become licensed. And you can be a licensed behavior analyst. And the only real reason that is important is, one, it opens up more doors and establishes the field as a kind of a standalone field, but it also means that you can begin to have other funding agencies like insurance companies that families can access their insurance plans to get services for their child with autism. Eventually, people will be able to access their insurance plans to get other types of services from the analysts. So it's one of the few degrees in psychology, I think, that you can actually get a certification at a bachelor's level. So if that's something that you're not really committed maybe to the whole PhD kind of long-term, and you sort of want to be at each level, I kind of want to have something, that's another area to consider.
Other questions?
Yes. I always wondered if you, your practice, how difficult it would be to either take time off or move afterwards. If you thought it would be like devastating.
Well, I just moved a year ago and I had a full-time counseling faculty job at CSU Bakersfield. I had a private practice at one time, which I decided to close, and then I was teaching in the counseling program. And so making that move was especially at my age, was a little bit scary. But right now my practice is thriving. But I moved here and it's growing, I should say. It's part-time right now, which is how I want it. But I moved here and I immediately got involved and connected with people with CAMP, which is the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, with AMP, the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I started making connections. I started teaching for the Relationship Skills Center here in town, which is an amazing little center where you can do all kinds of things, even with an AA degree and a bachelor's degree. And just making connections immediately, getting involved with people. On the first little camp meeting that I went to, I met a gal who is now my office partner. You know, and we share a lovely office together. And I'm starting now to get clients that I met when I first moved here. They're now referring people to me. You know, and so it's a bit of a cash output when you first start. You know, you have to buy furniture, you have to rent an office, you have to do these things. And but one of the other things I do is I always have pro bonos. So I always have at least 2 clients that I see for free. I've worked with the LGBT Center, Community Center, which is catty corner from our office, and my colleague and I, we will do discounted or at least an assessment and then a referral for that entity. I see students that are in the master's programs at a variety of schools in town for a reduced rate because they need those hours towards their own licensure or towards their school. And I miss working with master's and counseling students. You know, so I do a lot of free stuff now, and I do a lot of stuff for way cheaper than what I could charge. Partly because it's fun, I love working with the students, partly because it's the right thing to do in my mind. I want to give back because many people gave to me along the way, many people. And I will tell you, the more I give, the more I get back. And that is a fact. So, did that answer your question? Boy, okay. Sarah can vouch for that.
Answer mine, so.
So, what's the relationship center?
Oh, it's called the Relationship Skills Center. Pardon me?
Is that in Roseville?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know, it's in SAC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And, okay, then this is for the whole panel. What careers do you know of that you get in psychology just in psychology?
You can do some case management. The Relationship Skills Center has case managers who work with the main thing that the Relationship Skills Center does is that they teach relationship skills and communication skills and family and parenting skills, and there are many entities like that in Sacramento. I'm amazed at how many agencies there are. And people with AA degrees are doing some case management, you know. I would recommend at least getting your bachelor's so you get paid for that hard work. But you know, and they love the work that they do. And so they're helping connect the clients at the Relationship Skills Center with resources in town. They teach certain types of courses on parenting or a variety of different things.
So do you sometimes see people holding the same position with different level of degrees, but then just the person with bachelor's or master's are just getting paid way more than the person with the AA?
And I think that seems like a loaded question. The more education you get and the more certification you get paid more. You know, you become more expertise in your field. You know, and you get paid in kind for that. You know, at many agencies there are people at many different tiers, and they're all working hard. You know, but there's work that carries more liability and more expertise that you just have to get trained for. If that makes sense. So I worked for a county agency for a while I was an intern before I became licensed. And at that county agency, we had people with AA degrees that were working with clients that were sort of doing lower level case management. We had lots of bachelor's degree psychology majors and mostly psychology majors who were interacting, going to the homes, helping the families out to work with their children. It was a children's facility. The master's degree level people, social workers and MFTs, we were doing the therapeutic work with the children and the families. You know, and we had doctors and we had clinical psychologists who were doing a lot of the assessments. You know, we all work together. Certainly, at least in that kind of a system, the more education you get, you tend to get paid more. That's not always true, but for the most part. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Anyone else from this journal?
Yeah.
Other questions? Yes.
I was going to take the route of law enforcement, so I was going to apply for the FBI, but I'm getting very close to the cutoff age. And so I'd be kind of looking into for that. Because you said you do trauma, but I don't know if that's a different kind.
There's a variety of trauma. So, I mean, do you mean like victim's witness, or when you said you use the term therapy? Okay, so that implies a clinical degree to me. So,
Right.
either a master's, you could become a social worker and work with victims. You could be an MFT and work with victims. You could be a clinical psychologist and work with victims. If you want to be in a more therapeutic way.
Yeah, because I think for FBI, it'd be kind of profiling.
Okay.
Going to the crime scenes and seeing like what happened, what type of person are you looking for, and getting into the psychology of that. But if it doesn't work out, I need a PhD, so that's what I'm trying to figure out.
You know, if you are into crime scene investigation, and this is careers in psychology, and I apologize, but you might consider physical anthropology as well, because you do have crime scene investigation. You're looking at bone fragments and decay rate and things like that, and there are entry-level positions, associates, bachelor-level positions doing crime scene investigation with degrees in psychology, with degrees in anthropology, and that's actually a really good way to go as well, because you're working behind the scenes with law enforcement, but you're not going to have the same physical requirements and age requirements that you are being a peace officer or FBI agent. That's another good way to go.
Or forensic psychology.
Or forensic psychology.
No, I thought forensic psychology was just, you go to court for most of your career, and you might talk to the suspect and see if they can, stay on trial, things like that. So I was just kind of under the assumption that's all forensic psychology was. That's not true.
I think it could be broader. What you have as a degree, you would be a clinical psychologist with an emphasis in that the forensic area, whether it was with a, I'm trying to explain it. I don't want to talk about something I don't quite understand myself, so I feel like I should slow down. But you can specialize. You can go into that clinical psychology degree is broad, and you can work in a variety of places. You just depend on what you specialize in, if that makes sense. Okay.
We're going to try to get a forensics person in spring.
Yeah, that would be
Really? So we'll do this again, so you're interested in that. Okay. Yeah.
Money-wise, let's say how your career, was it fairly expensive, or how did you manage to get your degrees without, living on the streets? Like you said, living in a basement,
I swore I'd never eat top ramen again my entire life. I worked since 16. I never stopped working. For me, I was very focused on my education, and but I was also very determined to not take a lot of student loans out, because I didn't want to be held hostage by them and have to make career decisions because of student loans and needing to pay them back. So obviously something has to give. But I always picked jobs, like when I was in my Ph.D. program, I worked 2 different jobs. And I worked in group home over the weekends, and I would work double shifts and do whatever I needed to do. So probably what suffered for me during those years would be more of my relationships and things like that. And I was just very focused on that. I don't see any way to get through even a master's degree without working, unless you're really willing to, either you have somebody who's going to support you, or you're going to take student loans. And I really feel it is bad advice to encourage people to take student loans if they're going into a human services, because it's tough to find a job that you're going to be able to do all the other things that you want to do. So it's sort of kind of making a commitment to, when I was going through the program, there was kind of a nobility of being poor, to be a poor student. It was like a red badge of courage, and we'd have potlucks, and we would all talk about how poor we were, and, we would like, I think we would like purposely go try to find the worst apartments, and we could prove how poor we were. And it's kind of a different world. I work with I employ a lot of people who are getting their bachelor's degrees, and they have a very different standard of living than I had when I was going through. But I love learning, and I love studying, and I loved what I was doing. So, you kind of, your social, financial, and education. You kind of can have them all, but you kind of can't have them all. You sort of have to find your balance. And that's why I was very determined to do things that I knew at any given time, if I felt I needed to stop or wanted to stop, I would be gainfully employed. I don't know, did you guys find it different? Magical?
Actually, I did. So we got my bachelor's at Sac State, so I took student loans out to Sac State. It was less than you guys are going to have to take out, and I'm sorry. Yeah, but the good news is going to the University of Oregon, being more of a Tier 1 research school, they hire a lot of their grad students to work. So one of the fortunate things about going to a larger school, if you can get in, it can be very competitive. She left, sorry. It can be very competitive to get in, but they do support students, particularly Ph.D. students. If you can get right into a Ph.D. program, many of the larger schools do offer financial support. The trade-off is you're going to be expected to either do research or to be a TA, but they will cover your tuition and they will offer you a small stipend. It's a small stipend. It's enough basically to pay your rent and eat top ramen. But it is a way that you wouldn't necessarily have to take out student loans. So again, if you're going to a larger school that has those research monies coming in, there are ways to make it work, but you have to be able to get in generally those fields that are not necessarily oriented towards therapy. They might be oriented towards clinical research, so clinical psychology, or behavioral psychology, or cognitive neuroscience, or what have you. But there are ways to do that. I didn't get all of my education paid for that way, but I got some of it, and it was nice because out-of-state tuition really expensive.
Yeah, I got that when I went to New York, but I didn't realize you really can't live very well in New York City on $15,000 a year. And they forgot to tell me that they didn't take any taxes out along the way. So oh yeah. And the other jobs. But you're right, there is a lot of ways to get at least your tuition reimbursed and some small stipend.
And go to public school. Public school is cheaper than private school. Live at home. It's still cheaper a little bit, right? Work hard, then you spend all your money on. It's doable. It's doable, but you probably aren't going to get out of school without trying something.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a fun question, because there's a lot of TV shows that show, oh, look at me, and like Lie to Me, or just shows that show a little bit about how people can tell people's brains and all that. Is there like myths, and does it bother you that they kind of make you look a certain way? And really,
do you mean as a therapist,
as a therapist, or just as a psychologist?
I like the shows that really make fun of therapists.
Well, we actually really can read your brain. It's not a myth.
Anything you watch on TV is probably a myth.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't mean to be a little, pessimistic, but it's or there's a grain of truth to it.
But is there like some type of like fun things you do actually like about your job? It's not just so serious,
Oh, I like everything about my job.
Even
Yeah. We laugh a lot. Fun things about being a therapist.
Just because I like fun things, and I just want to have fun at my job, even though it's supposed to be some type, it's supposed to be serious, and it's supposed to be serious. But I'm also a very fun, loving person.
Well, yeah, and my job, it is a highly relational job. I am a relationship therapist. That is the approach that I take. I create a relationship with my clients, It has boundaries, and it's a professional relationship, but it is fun. And a lot of what I'm teaching them is to, this is going to sound so cliche, but a lot of it is, don't sweat the small stuff and have a sense of humor and don't take yourself so seriously, And so it can be fun, it can be, we laugh, every client I ever have, sometimes they're crying and laughing at the same time, you know, but the TV shows, yeah, I'm not a very good teller of when somebody's lying to me, you know, it's not magic.
But you know, that's really a good point, and I think that most of the people I know who are getting into my age group, who've done this for a long time, you know, and you take it very serious at the beginning, that ultimately it comes down to helping people learn how to be happy and helping them have happiness in their life no matter what problems they have. And sometimes being very serious about people's problems helps them become bigger problems. Sometimes people just need to say, yeah, that's a problem, and this is how I get over it. But, you know, it's like I feel like I kind of go backwards in my career. I'm a scientist and a behavior analyst, and yet the longer I'm doing this, the more I'm feeling more like I actually feel more spiritual and cognitive because that's where you end up getting. So that's exactly the kind of people who need to go into psychology. The human spirit is human experience. It's not so serious, really. You know, unless you're living in a country where you're afraid to go out because you might get killed on the street. You know, most people are not living in a war zone, although they think they are.
All right, so we have a little bit more time. Did someone not ask a question and you're dying to ask a question?
I have a question again. I've already asked a question, but I was kind of going off of what she said, asking about student loans and all of that. Is the salary you make when you get your career pay off in the end and worth it after all of those student loans and school and time that you put into it?
I would say if you're doing what you love to do, it's worth it.
Okay.
That is my pat answer. If you are doing what you love to do, don't worry about the money. So what? You're not going to get brand new Lexus.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to wait to buy a house. And by saying, trust me, those things don't matter if you get to go to work and do what you like to do every day.
Okay.
You know? Yeah, you're going to have student loans, but you know, you're going to owe somebody money in life. Why not do it in something that's valuable to you? And that may be a good important answer, but what do you guys think?
I think that's a good answer. I think you try to limit it as much as you can, but you know, education is valuable.
Okay.
It is valuable.
Yeah.
It's valuable here, and the type of life that you lead.
But it does take a balance.
One more question about getting in. You said something about if you can get into the colleges. If you have, you know, over a 3.0, is it a pretty good chance of getting in, or is there like a ton of kids with 4.0 that get knocked out?
Well, see, and that's actually really great question. I mean, for those programs that are where they do provide a lot of financial support, there's a lot of incentive for really bright people to apply for those positions. So it's always going to be competitive. The advantage that you have, though, is in building relationships, because it's not just about what are your grades. I mean, particularly grad school, it's not about grades anymore. It's about what research did you already do? Who are the people who are recommending you? What do you want to do later? So it's not just about the grades, it's what are you doing apart from that. Because by the time it's grad school, everybody's got good grades.
Yeah, that's true. By the time you get to grad school, everybody's got good
And
grades.
because I have a daughter in high school now, so is her high school grades going to really come into play when she gets into the higher levels? Is that if she wants to go, you know, after she goes through school here and she goes into a higher level, is it going to mess her up that she was getting C's
In high school?
in her sophomore year? Yeah.
No, my GPA in high school is less than 3.0. So, I mean, it's...
I'm like, you have to get 4.0, and she's like, oh, I'm
it doesn't matter at all.
And I think universities are, I mean, I barely graduated from high school. That's a long story y'all don't need to hear. But, you know, and I was able to redeem myself and work hard in college, you know. So goodness high school doesn't get held against you. Because you guys have community college. Yeah, it's not on your permanent record. You know, but it's also, I think universities are looking for students that are well-rounded. Both of my daughters got into very good schools. One of them got into a second very good school. Very competitive, but they were well-rounded. You know, so they did do volunteer things. They got involved with these things. They both have jobs, so they could illustrate. Look, I can have a job and I can get pretty good grades, and I volunteered because I'm interested in the world, not just myself and my grade. Is that what you guys think?
Yeah, depending on,
Yeah.
why they're not getting good grades too, if it's something.
Well, good grades are always good.
Good grades are always good.
That's true, yeah.
All right, so this concludes the formal careers in psychology workshop. Yeah.
I just read a really good book for, and sorry guys, but for women, and it's written by the CEO of Google. I forget her name, and it's called Lean In. And I would really recommend it. When I read it, I was like, oh my god, this is like exactly how I felt most of my life. So it's called Lean In, and it's if you Google it, and she's the CEO of Google, and I'd really recommend that. Google or Facebook? Facebook. She's Google. Facebook. But yeah, did you read that book?
No, but it's on my list.
It's good. It's really good.
A couple other things. There is a psychology club. Any psychology club members here? Can you tell us a little bit? When do you meet? No, but for the psychology club.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's Thursday.
Thursday afternoons.
That's like 5:30.
5 o'clock for psychology club. If you would like to receive extra credit, if your teacher is giving you extra credit, you can see me or you can see Sony Verma. And also Sandy Muraki has some good handouts for you as well. Thank you for coming. Your TV. Your TV student. Just give it back to me.
Cool. Yeah.